Well, it's a joy to be here. Thank you so much. I could not believe the title of this summit, the Hope Summit. It is so mind-blowing. Let me begin by acknowledging the Indigenous people of this land, the Aboriginal people, and join my spirit with theirs, those who cared for this land for so long. Now we share that caring responsibility. Thank you all for being here, for giving up a whole day for this. Outside my office, there is a word painted as a gift to me by 3 Year 6 girls as I left my last school. And the word is, guess what it is? Hope. And they painted it on an orange background with black letters and wrote all sorts of other lovely words and then put all sorts of colours around it. It was stunning. And I have that as I walk into my office every day. It is a huge joy. Now I have to work out how to work this. I just press that one. Has that done something? Excellent. In order to break down the impossible difference between a school head and the students, I don't think there's a difference, but they tend to. They come and talk to me, but they don't necessarily tell me all the things that they would like me to know. So instead of having that kind of traditional distance, I invite people in for lunch. And we sit on the floor. I sit on the listening chair, nicknamed. That's that chair with the sort of cut-off legs. It's not just because I'm so old that I need armrests to push myself out, though that is true. It allows us to sit together and hear stories from one another's lives. One of the other little tricks that I do is I have the students of various ages sit on my seat. And while they are sitting on my seat, they get to make the decisions that are binding in the school for that particular moment. It's a little magic exercise. I say to them, when you're sitting on the seat, you're the principal, and anything at all that you decide will apply. The moment your bottom leaves the seat, the normal world returns again. Now, while they're sitting on the seat, all sorts of things happen. The school turns into chocolates. Mrs. Smith gets dismissed. Homework gets banned. All manner of things happen until one day a student sat on the seat and paused and then just looked up at me and said, "What is it that you do all day?" And alarmingly, I couldn't answer it. I didn't quite know what I did all day. I knew it was very busy and occupied. I thought a lot about that question, what is it that you do all day? Out of the mouth of a 5-year-old, I was stopped short to say what it is that I do. Yes, I have a job description. Yes, there are obligations that I must meet. But what is it that I do all day? And I thought at length about that. I'm deeply influenced, of course, as many of us are, by the scriptures. I went back to 1 Peter, and the word hope appears there. We need to be a living hope, and I decided that our responsibility as leaders is to be purveyors of hope. That's preeminently what we're about, the purveyors of hope. And Peter, in that letter, describes hope as living hope. It's here now. It's not just some mystical thing that might occur in the future. It is now, absolutely now. I love what Ronnie said. Now is tomorrow. Tomorrow is here. It'll never be better than this. Let's yearn for that together. But then thinking about what do we mean by hope? What does that word mean? A good friend of mine who's a Bible translator was working in Papua New Guinea. And she came to some sections of scripture that she was trying to translate. And she came to the word hope. And she was up in the highlands of Papua New Guinea, and she said to them, "There is no word in your language for hope." That didn't mean that they had no hope, that there was no single word for that vast concept that you and I understand as hope. She didn't know quite how to translate it. She was played with all sorts of concepts until one day she was up on the landing strip waiting for the supply plane to arrive. And she saw the tribespeople looking out into the distance in a gap between 2 hills. And they just lingered and watched and waited with some confidence for what was about to happen. And she said, "What is it you're doing now?" And they described it, and they captured the word, and that's the word she used to translate the word hope. And And I've never forgotten that. What is the word hope? It's now. But we live in a world with realpolitik. Life is a long song. And my great privilege, and Bryony's great privilege, and others who share this walk, is to influence the world of the young person now. And there are certain realities. We have to be future-minded and live in the present world. Life is a long song. We recognise that the lives that are before us, with whom we work, will go through enormous change in the coming years. We get our language right, we write our mission statements and our vision statements, and you'll notice in the mission statement that we've been playing with, the word hope appears, especially in the vision statement. It's probably too blurry to see it, but it really matters to us. But there is a reality. Schools, like mine, like all schools, exist in the here and now. And I want to say to you that there is a stress, and a deep stress, that is at war to some extent with the notion of hope. It is a serious conflict. I've placed these texts up here not to debate the issue, but to illustrate the context. We face a time when schools and their business is under enormous scrutiny. Probably fair enough. But for the national good, possibly for the national prosperity, we have reduced the Educative Act down to quantifiable measures. And then we assess the performance of a student against that standard, and we tell them how good they are. And we tell them that a lot. And we write reports on them, and we remind them of how they're failing those reports. And then we write reports on teachers and on schools. That is the realpolitik. And somehow we need to find a hopeful story in the context of that sort of pressure. Let me tell you about David. David was a person who the staff of the school felt that there was no hope, and with good reason. David was a student of mine some years ago. He and a friend were known as bullies, and they used to persecute others. Appallingly, one day, they filmed their persecution of another student and placed it on YouTube. And I became aware of that, and the uprising of anger against David and his friend was so appalling that I was forced to ask him to leave the school. I also discovered after I'd done that he had been selling drugs. It was a very difficult situation. He left. About 9 months later, he returned. Can you take me back? I said, David, I'm sorry. There are times when our conduct needs us to go somewhere else and to be different. This is such a time. He said, no, please take me back. I regretted no. Another 9 months passed, and he returned again. Please take me back. I want to start again. David, tell me why. What have you been doing? He said, for the last almost 2 years, I've been a car park attendant at Bondi Beach, and I've come to my senses. I don't want to live like that. That's not the world that I want. Now, there's nothing against car park attendants, let me quickly, hastily assure you. But for him, it was not enough. I said, what do you really want in your life, David? And he said, I want to be a doctor. I want to learn to be a doctor, and I want to go to a place where there's deep need. I said, David, if I took you back, I'd become a laughingstock of the school. The staff would walk out. I'd be taking such an enormous risk. What would you do? When the staff was saying there is no hope for David, what would you do? I took him back. Against all my better judgment, I took him back. David finished his medical degree last year. And now working in the Northern Territory, just as he promised. Never give up. Never give up. Our yearning is therefore to create a hope-filled institution. I hate that word. A hope-filled institution. Something that creates a context in behaviours where there is sufficient grace, sufficient compassion, sufficient risk to say to David, despite all of the human realities of his situation, come and try again, because we're bigger than that. An institution is not so important that it's more important than the individual. An institution is not so important that it's more important than the individual, nor its reputation. A hope-filled school never gives up on anyone, even though the conduct sometimes is difficult. A hope-filled context or culture needs to show humility. It's not about the institution. It's about the people who are within it and their infinite possibilities. It is like standing and looking between those two hills and waiting for something to come. And you know it's going to come, but it's not here yet. You know it's going to come, but it's not here yet. A hope-filled institution will be one that gives voice to all, not just to the articulate or to the clever. I've often felt that schools are places for extroverted, compliant people. Do you know what I'm talking about here? They're the ones who survive. They're the ones who get noticed. They're often clever. They're often articulate. They know how to work the system to their advantage. Good for them. But that's less than a quarter of the population. What about the rest? Do they not have a voice? My word, they do. And the integrity of the school culture also matters. Don't talk to me, show me. More importantly, include me, involve me, make me part of the story as well. And seek out justice. Some weeks ago, I had the extraordinary privilege of going into Alice Springs and into the Yiparinya School. And I rode the bouncy bus out into one of the homeland communities in a place with the unlikely name of Sandy Bore, which is immediately next to, I'm sure you know it, Black Tank. Those are the two homeland communities. And the children travel for an hour and a half one way and an hour and a half the other to get to and from school every day. On the way back, the children who had been calling out, by the way, to familiar landmarks, they talk to country, because country's a relative. They call out to the country, I'm coming home again now, in language. How beautiful is that? We make highways. They call out to the country as if it's a friend, a relative, an uncle or an aunt. They said to the bus driver, please stop because we want to go and get something for these white fellas who are on the bus with us. And they disappeared out into the bush, and it is rough country out there. They wanted to find bush bananas. And they brought back for us bush bananas. Who's ever had a bush banana here? Anybody ever had a bush banana? They're very fibrous, aren't they? They're very fibrous. I nodded sagely and told them how nice it was, picking things out of my teeth for the rest of the night. Our job is to set an umbrella over the culture so that people can thrive, so that people can become the best versions of themselves that they can possibly be, so that we can create the world that Robert Kennedy reminded us 50 years ago in Cape Town when he was speaking. That we can create the world that will have 1,000 kindly small acts that together will form a ripple of hope that will course across the whole of the globe and change the world. That's the work that we're involved in, and nothing less will do. Hope is such a big concept. It's almost overwhelming. It is almost beyond a simple word. It is almost beyond language. It is the pause of looking between two hills and with some certainty know what's coming, and we have the courage to keep going while we await it. Thanks very much.